Hi, and welcome to the third module of our course Revit 2024, Level 1. And this is the third module of 9 modules. And in this module, we're going to be looking at preparing and setting up your new project and what options you need to have in place and what you need to set up and how to get started. Now, in the training content that I've provided, I have included this image. I've taken this from the TradeMe website, and this is just an example of a property for sale. But I thought this would be a good exercise to use this as the basis for us to model an existing building. So this is a small unit, a living unit, and we're going to be using this as the basis for our course henceforth. So the first thing we're going to do when we set up our new project is we're going to be looking at this floor plan that we've got here, and we're going to be converting that into a proper Revit model. Now, before we dive into all of that, let's just look at some of the model setup options that we want to have in place in our Revit environment so that we can work efficiently. So the first thing we want to do is we would like to set up our Revit options and more specifically the file locations for default project templates and the default path for our family files. Now, in the training content that I provided in the course on our website, you'll see that there is a link towards the Revit 2024 content, and this is for Australian and New Zealand content packs. Now, if you click on that, it'll open up this page, and if you click on this link or right click and choose open a new tab, it will then open up the Revit 2024 content. In here, if you scroll down past the first section, so there's Revit 2024 content packs. If you scroll past this first section and you get to the second one that says international content packs, here you're going to find a content pack for Australia, and you can download that one. Note that it is for Revit 2024. And if you scroll further down, you'll see there's another one for New Zealand. So there's the international New Zealand content pack. So this includes family libraries, family templates, and normal project templates for New Zealand and Australia, amongst other international content packs. So what you need to do is you need to download these and install them. And once you've done that, then you can head over to Revit and we can start setting up our options in Revit to show us these templates when we create a new project, that it is the correct ones. And once we've created a project, if we want to link to libraries and content, that we make sure that it's from the relevant content packs. So to do that, we need to go here to the home button view and toggle the home view so that we can see the project view. We click on the file button here and then we choose options. Okay, so from options, we can go to the file locations tab. And here is where we're going to set up locations for project templates. And you'll notice here at the top, I've got several items set up already in mine. So I've got one for construction template, one for architectural, one for structural, one for mechanical, one for systems, another one for electrical, and another one for plumbing. So this is the name of the template, and then there is a path to the template location. And you'll see if I just select this one here for construction and I click on the browse button, by default, it's going to go to, in my system, see program data, Autodesk RVT 2024 templates, English. Once you're on the English one, you can then select Australia, New Zealand, or the British ones if you prefer, and then you can select the correct template that it has to use or should be using for that particular item. You can rename these, of course, and you can remove them, and you can add new items in here if you prefer. I'm going to do the same here for my architectural one, making sure that I'm using the New Zealand standard one. And the architectural one for New Zealand is just one that says default NZL ENU. You can choose to use the New Zealand ones, or you can choose to use the Australian ones here if you prefer. I've left mine as default, which is probably the default English ones, which is, you can see there from the tooltip is the British ones. It's up to you, really. As long as it's in a metric system, I am quite happy with whatever template is being used. It doesn't mean that I wouldn't have access to the families from the New Zealand library, however. That is a separate setup that we're going to do here under places. Excuse me. So this is just to load up the template. And since this, I know that this British template is already going to be using a metric unit system. I actually prefer to use this one. I like this one. So I'm going to keep that as it is. Right, here by places, I'm going to click on places. And then what I did is it defaulted to the metric library, which is this English UK one, which is not what I want. So what I did is I clicked on the plus button. It adds a new library. I changed the name to NZ library. And then in the library path, I just browsed to the folder that I've got here on the screen. So again, that program data folder, Autodesk, RVT 2024, libraries, English, and then New Zealand. Okay, so I've set that up. You can do the same for the Australian libraries because sometimes they have additional components that are not present in the New Zealand one. And I also still want access to the British one because they would have a much larger library than both the New Zealand or the Australian libraries. So I'm going to set up another one here just to demonstrate. And let's do the one for Australia. So I'm going to say Australia library, or just to keep it consistent, I'm going to say AU. And then I'm going to select here to browse. And it defaults to the previous selection, which is good. So I only have to go up one folder, select Australia, and click open. And look at that. Now I've added my new library location. I'm going to move it one up. And then just to keep things consistent, I'm going to call this one UK library. Okay, so now we've got our places set up, and if I click on OK, that's going to be stored in my Revit environment. So I only need to do this once. I don't have to repeat this step. But now when I create a new project, first of all, the templates available here is based on the templates we've set up in our options. And when I create a new project and I were to load new family content into my project, and I'll show an example, it will then default to those folders that we've set up. So here we can see NZ library and we can see the AU library that's been set up. So if I go to NZ library, it's going to show me the New Zealand families. And if I go to Australia, it's going to show me the Australian families. Okay, so that sorts that for us. The next thing that we would like to do is start to set up our project. So we've covered this here, the options. We want to start setting up our project, setting up a grid system. Grids are really useful in Revit because of the parametric nature, as we discussed in the first module, the introduction and the background, it's a parametric system and it allows for the relationship between entities to update each other bidirectionally depending on their relationship to each other. So grids is a really good reference system to set this up in our plan views. And after we've set up the grids, we're going to set up some levels. So I'm going to show you how to set up some levels here somewhere. And we're going to be talking about the elevation markers and views. And once we've set all of that up, we'll be looking at the floor plans and the layouts that's been produced as a result of that. So that's all we're going to do for this module. But keep in mind that we are going to be using this example floor plan here as our basis. So before we start modeling in Revit, let's just have a look at what we are working with here. So in this area here, where my cursor is, we can see there's the ground floor, and then we've got the first floor. So if we started to plan our grid layout, we would probably want to create one grid line over there. We'll have another one here. I would say another one here. I think we'd need another one here, and I would create another grid there. So this allows us to create the deck area, which has got that width. I know that that's the width because, obviously this distance here is smaller than this distance here. And we can see that that's 4.78 by 2.94. So this will be 2.94. Okay. Then we've got our next grid here. Oh, I see there's a little wall here. So we might choose to place a intermediate grid here. So maybe not a major grid, but an intermediate grid here. So if we had grids here, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, we might call this one 3A. Okay. Then in the horizontal direction, we're going to create a grid line over here. I'm going to create another one that sits across over there. We're going to have another one that's sitting here, and we'll have another one sitting there. Okay. Now, this will also apply to the first floor that we've got here. So of course, when we create a grid in any view, it's going to automatically, sort of duplicate or extrapolate that to the other layout views that I've got also. And we can see that we've got a wall here that is not going to be in a grid line. That's okay. We can choose, of course, to have an intermediate grid there. So again, if we make this one here A, B, C, D, we could call this one B1 if we wanted to, just as an intermediate grid. But there are several internal walls across here, so we're not going to be bothered about that too much. As long as we have our main grid set up for the majority of the project, that's going to be okay. Plus, maybe we are going to change and have our ABCs at the top and our numerical values there on the left hand. I always confuse which is which. It depends, really just on the project you're working with and whether there's an existing grid system or not. It's not really that important as long as you use consistency across your project. Okay, so with that in mind, let's start with our grid layout. So we're going to start by drawing in this first grid line here, grid line 1. And we're going to do that by just on the architecture ribbon tab here. You'll see that you can also access grids from the structures tab, from the precast tab, no, from the systems tab. No, okay, so just architecture and structure. All right, so we'll click on grid. And then from my draw panel tools here, I'm going to choose the draw line tool. And then I'm going to start from the bottom, drawing upwards. And I'm going to explain why. Because the bubble is created at the second click. So I click and release. I drag my cursor up here when I see it's snapping to a vertical orthogonal line there. You can see it's 90 degrees from the horizontal. So I don't have to press any buttons to do that. It will snap to it automatically when I move my cursor anywhere close to that orthogonal snap angle. And then when I click again, it's going to create that grid. Now the command is still active, and I can tell because the contextual ribbon grid for ribbon menu for grids is still active. Now, while this is active, if I start clicking anywhere in the screen, it's going to start drawing additional grids. So what I want to do is to press escape and then escape again. So 2 times you need to press the escape button to exit that command successfully. Okay, remember that. Now, when I select the grid again, you'll notice a few grip points appearing here. So if I check that box, you'll see the bubble disappears. If I click it again, it appears. If I click this box, the bottom bubble appears. And if I click it again, it disappears. If I click and drag this grip here at the bottom, it means that I can extend that grid, but only in the axis that it was created in. So I can't move this left or right. Okay, so it's going to maintain that axis and direction that it was drawn in. There's this break button here. So if I click that, it's going to create an elbow as such and provide me with some additional grip points that I can use to now stretch this grid or, adjust that if I had multiple overlapping grids. I'm going to press Control Z to undo, or you can use the undo or the undo drop down here to undo to a previous state. All right, that's our first grid that we've drawn in. Now we want to create the second grid, but this time we're not going to use the draw tool. We are going to use the pick lines tool, and we're going to specify an offset value. Now, what is that offset value going to be? It's the first distance here, which is 2.75 meters. Okay, so we're going to type in here 2750 because we're working in millimeters, or I could have put in 2.75 m and press enter, and Revit will automatically convert that to millimeters for us. Now, when I move my cursor to the right end here of the first grid, when it's highlighted, I can see the projection that it's going to create. And if I click, it's going to create that grid. Great. So we've got grid line 2. Now we need the next one. That distance is going to be 2.94 meters. So again, we're going to go here 2940, press enter, and we're going to create grid number 3. The next one we'll have to compute a little bit. So here we've got 2.91 meters, and then we've got 2.73 meters, and then there we've got 1.19 meters from that line. So let's say that we first create grid line 4 here. So I'm going to open up my calculator quickly, and I'm going to type here 2910 plus 2730. So that gives us a total of 5.640 meters, or 5,640 millimeters. So let's go here, 5640, and we're going to create that next grid. And then the final one here is we've got 1.15 meters, so 1150. and we create the grid over there. Notice instead of pressing escape twice, I right click and choose cancel twice. Okay. Some of the bubbles overlap, but I'm working on a scale of 1 in 100 here. I'm going to change this to 1 in 50 because that's going to make it easier for me to see what I'm working with. And you can see, as I did in the first exercise with the test drive, I'm selecting everything here by doing a cross selection rather than a box selection. And then I am clicking and dragging these grids just to position a little bit more centrally in my model. And where is center? Center is where these elevation markers, if I had to draw a line between them, intersect. Okay, so more or less there. Doesn't have to be perfect. Next, we're going to do the horizontal grid. So we'll start here with grid A, and I did A, B, C, D, but maybe I should start with A at the top, right? So that was a little bit backwards from my end, but okay, it doesn't matter. We'll fix it now. So we're going to start here at the top, and we'll draw in the first grid line. Again, I'm going to click on grids, and I can't pick a line because I need to start with the first horizontal line. I'm going to make sure offset is set to 0, because if I have an offset value here, just to show you, and I draw, it's going to draw at an offset. You see that it's actually drawing below my click points. I don't want that. I want it to be directly on the points where I click for now. So we're going to create that first grid. I'm going to exit the commands. And you can see it's automatically incrementing those bubbles. But here I wanted A. So what I do is I zoom in. I double click on where it says A and or whatever it was, 6, and then I change that to capital A. All right. If you make a mistake, because if you accidentally click in the wrong position, something unexpected might happen. If you make a mistake, just press Control Z and it'll undo your last command. Now that we've done that, we can go to pick an offset again. What is the next offset here? We can see 0.94 meters. Okay, so we're going to say here 940 millimeters, and we're going to click to offset that towards the inside. And notice now it's clever enough to know that the next grid line increment is going to be grid line B. All right, now we have got this grid line here, and we want the next one down here. And what is that distance? That'll be 2.92 meters. So we're going to go 2920, and we're going to create that grid. C, excuse me. And then the final one here at the bottom, and we might have to calculate this a little bit. So we know that this distance from the top to the bottom is 4.78 meters. So we actually don't have to calculate. We can go 4780, right? And we can offset that grid to the bottom. And we know that that distance now would be from that point to that point. There's one thing that I should mention here. We don't know what the widths of these walls are, and these dimensions would surely be internal dimensions. So when we create our external walls, we're going to keep that in mind. But this is just an exercise, so we don't have to be too pedantic about that. Let's just assume that those measurements are internal, and then we'll work with that accordingly. Now that we've got the grid drawn in, notice that when I click any of the grids in a particular direction and I select their grip points, that all of the grids will adjust with it, because grids are quite smart and they automatically become parametric and creates a parametric relation to each other in the group. So I only have to drag the ends of one grid to update the whole group automatically. Now we've got these grids created in level 0, and if we jump to level 1, you'll see there they are. Of course, we haven't set the scale on this level or this view, so I'm going to do that now, set that to 1 in 50, and then I actually want to access one of the elevation views, in fact all of them, because I want to create the level. So we've got level 0 and level 1, and there's a site level which I'll talk about later. But level 0 and level 1 I want to set up, and this is a double story building, so I want to have another level added to that. Okay, so I'm double clicking on the east elevation here, and the first thing is I'm going to change this to a scale of 1 in 50. The existing levels, I'm just going to tidy up a little bit, so I'm using the grips to drag them a bit. Sometimes you have to zoom in to get that grip point, and and not accidentally selecting this button or grip on the level to break the grip line. So sometimes you have to zoom in a bit to get that exact grip. I'm going to drag this down a little bit so that they overlap, and that looks a little bit nicer and neater. And while we're here, let's change this level here of grid of this level 1 grid from 4 meters to 2,750. Okay, so that's going to be our first floor ceiling height, and then we want to add another level on top of that. So here where we select grids, just to the left of that, we can select level. And again, just like with grids, I can use the pick tool and we can set an offset value here to 750. And I can select just above this grid to create my new level at 5.5 meters. How nice is that? Okay, so we've created our levels. This is going to be our ground floor. This is going to be our first floor level, and up here somewhere is going to be the roof. Okay, so we're going to have walls coming here from the ground to the first floor, from the first floor to the top of that first floor, which is level 2 that we've got there. Okay, and then we're going to have a roof on top of that. So I probably want to extend these grid lines out a bit so that we can see clearly once we start adding our geometry to the model. Now I'm going to do the same on the north elevation. I don't have to create the levels and the grids again because they've already been created. So I'm just going to stretch these out a bit. I'm going to change the scale, of course, so I can see what it's going to look like. And I can visually space these objects a bit better so that once we start modeling that they appear nicely. And I like to do that early on. Things might change and you might move things around a bit at a later stage, but it's just good to set that up and you've got a good platform to start working from. Okay. Now that we've set all of that up, we are almost ready to go. So let's see what else is in our modeling setup exercise content. So we've set up our grids, we have placed them, we've adjusted them, we've looked at opening our elevation views and editing them. I haven't spoken about the elevation markers, so let's talk about that quickly. If I go back here to any of the floor plan views, which we can see here, you'll notice we've got the elevation markers, right? And if I select them, you'll see that we've got all of these different grips and things appearing and objects appearing when I select them. Also, if I select the top part of this view, it's going to display the actual view line. And look, it's got a view depth. It means that this elevation marker, right, which is sitting at the south side looking north from the south, so this is the south elevation, is looking to the northern direction of this building of a depth of whatever I set here. So if I place this in the middle of my building, this will change from an elevation view to actually a elevational section view, right? But I want to make sure it's an elevation view, so I'm going to leave it there looking all the way to the other side of my project. The same happens here with the west elevation. Here we've got the east elevation, and here we've got the north elevation. Okay, so those are the elevation markers. They are by default set up in every blank project, so you don't have to create them. You can move them around, you can change them, and if you really wanted to play around with creating new elevation views, you can go here to the View ribbon tab, and you'll see on the elevation you can create a new elevation view. Okay. So we've set up our levels and that's about it. So everything has been set up now. We are ready to start modeling, and that's what we're going to do in the next module. So I'll see you soon, and I hope you find this useful. See you in the next module. Bye.